My wife sat me down and told me she was leaving me for my best friend. The reason? I didn't work hard enough. I wasn't ambitious enough, and she was tired of living a mediocre life. She thought I was a failure she needed to discard. What she didn't know was that my lack of work was earning me over $500,000 a year, and the life she was walking away from was one most people could only dream of. Now, after losing everything, they're both begging for a handout, and they're about to find out just how ambitious I can be. I can pinpoint the exact second the architecture of my marriage was condemned. It wasn't with the roar of a wrecking ball, but with the quiet, chilling finality of a foundation cracking underfoot. Lily was sitting at our polished mahogany kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together on a sunny Saturday afternoon years ago, a relic from a time when us felt like an unbreakable noun. Her thumb moved in a hypnotic, lazy swipe across the glowing screen of her phone, navigating a world that I was clearly no longer a part of. I had just walked through the door, the familiar weight of my work briefcase in hand, the scent of the city still clinging to my coat. I was on the cusp of that blissful moment of release, of shedding the day's armor, when she looked up. Her eyes, once pools of warmth I'd gladly drowned in, were now flat and distant, like frosted glass. "Derek, I want a divorce," she said. The words were delivered with the same casual inflection she might use to comment on the evening weather or announce that we were out of milk. There was no preamble, no gentle easing into the devastation, just a clean, brutal severance. The sound of my briefcase hitting the hardwood floor seemed to echo in the sudden, cavernous silence of the room. I stood there, momentarily paralyzed, replaying the sentence in my mind to ensure I hadn't misheard. The air thickened around me, heavy with unspoken history and a future that was being erased before my very eyes. "Excuse me," I finally managed, my voice a carefully constructed mask of calm over the pandemonium erupting in my chest. She sighed, a small, impatient puff of air, as if my confusion was a personal inconvenience. I said, "I want a divorce," she repeated, her tone laced with a condescending clarity that implied I was intellectually deficient. A sane man would have been engulfed by a tidal wave of rage, or perhaps shattered into a million pieces of heartbreak. I, however, was simply struck by the sheer, unmitigated audacity of it all. The chutzpah. After 12 years, after building a life brick by painful, joyful brick, this was how it ended? The reason, when it came, was the salt in the wound, a justification so profoundly disconnected from our reality that it bordered on the absurd. "I can't keep living like this," she declared, crossing her arms over her chest in a gesture of defiant finality. "I need someone who actually works, who contributes. This isn't the life I signed up for, Derek." I nearly choked. The accusation that I didn't work was so ludicrous, so utterly baseless, that I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up inside me. I swallowed it down, maintaining my composure. For the better part of a decade, I had been meticulously, obsessively building my career as a high-level consultant from nothing. I had sacrificed evenings, weekends, and countless hours of sleep to cultivate a client base that afforded me a six-figure salary, a number that was steadily climbing towards 7. I had been laying the groundwork for a future of absolute financial security, a future she would have been the primary beneficiary of. But Lily had never shown the slightest flicker of interest in the mechanics of my work. She never asked about my projects, my clients, or the complexities of my day. In her mind, because I often worked from a home office and didn't wear a suit and tie every day, I was simply coasting. I was a hobbyist, playing at a career, while she dreamt of a man with a corner office and a tangible, corporate title she could boast about at dinner parties. I leaned my weight against the cool granite of the kitchen counter, studying the woman before me. She was a stranger, draped in the familiar skin of my wife. Her certainty was absolute, a hard, glossy shell that left no room for doubt or discussion. This was a verdict, not a negotiation. "All right," I said, the word emerging from my lips with a calm I didn't feel. I deliberately placed my briefcase on the floor beside me. Her head tilted, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She had expected a fight, a scene, a desperate plea. My easy acquiescence had thrown her off script. "All right," she echoed, her voice a little less steady. "Yes, Lily. If a divorce is what you want, I won't stand in your way." For a fleeting moment, I saw a shadow of concern cross her features, the briefest hesitation. But it was immediately snuffed out, replaced by that smug, self-satisfied expression I had come to know and loathe. It was the look of someone who believes they are holding all the cards. "Good," she said, her confidence surging back. Because I've already consulted with a lawyer. The paperwork is being drawn up. You'll need to be out of the house by the end of the month. My house. The sheer nerve was almost comical, but I held my tongue. There was no point in arguing, no sense in revealing my hand so early in the game. If she wanted me to leave, I would play the part of the defeated husband. For now. Fair enough, I replied, my voice even. I turned to head upstairs to the bedroom that was no longer ours. I could feel her eyes boring into my back, a silent demand for the emotional explosion I refused to give her. She wanted me to scream, to beg, to validate her decision by proving how much I was losing. I gave her nothing but the sound of my footsteps ascending the stairs. In the sanctuary of our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the king-size bed, the silence pressing in on me. The reality of the situation began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just about a divorce. This was a power play. Lily needed to cast me as the failure, the dead weight she was heroically cutting loose in order to justify her own choices. Perhaps, on some level, she still believed I would fight for her, that I would grovel for another chance to prove my worth. She had fundamentally misunderstood the man she had been married to for over a decade. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare, a campaign of passive aggression designed to chip away at my resolve. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. The way I folded the laundry was inefficient. The way I brewed my morning coffee was amateurish. The evenings I spent reading were a waste of time. She spun a narrative of my incompetence, a story she seemed to be telling herself as much as me. And then, the name began to surface, woven into the fabric of her daily critiques like a poisoned thread. Ethan. Ethan, my best friend. Or at least, the man who had worn that title for 15 years. At first, it was subtle. Ethan was saying the other day that this new coffee shop downtown is amazing. Or, Ethan suggested we should really get the gutters cleaned before winter. Innocuous on the surface, but the frequency was alarming. Soon, it became clear that Ethan was no longer just a friend. He was the benchmark against which I was being measured and found wanting. I didn't confront her. It would have been pointless. I wasn't ready to show my cards, to let her know that I saw the full scope of her betrayal. So, I let her believe she was in complete control. I played the part of the oblivious, wounded husband, too absorbed in his own quiet failure to notice the affair blossoming right under his nose. One evening, I was packing a duffel bag with some essentials for a temporary move. Lily appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed, a contemptuous sneer playing on her lips. So, she began, her tone dripping with condescension. Have you figured out where you're going to go? Your parents' basement, maybe. I calmly zipped the bag shut and turned to face her, my expression unreadable. Don't you worry about me, Lily. I'll be just fine. She let out an exasperated huff, clearly frustrated by my refusal to crumble. Good, because Ethan and I are planning a little dinner party here next weekend. It would be awkward if you were still hanging around. A dinner party. In my house. With my best friend. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it was almost a work of art. I had to admire the craftsmanship of her cruelty. Don't worry, I said, shouldering the bag and walking towards her. I'll be long gone before then. As I brushed past her in the doorway, I caught the triumphant glint in her eye. She thought she had won. She thought I was retreating in shame and defeat, a broken man shuffling off into obscurity. But Lily had no idea what she had just done. She had handed me a lit match in a house soaked in gasoline. If she wanted to watch it all burn, then so be it. I would simply step back and enjoy the show. And when the embers finally cooled, I would be the one left standing, ready to watch the flames consume her and the man she had chosen over me. Sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't a loud, fiery explosion. It's a quiet, patient, calculated demolition. It's allowing your enemies to believe they've won, letting them dig their own graves with giddy enthusiasm, all while you stand by silently, holding the shovel, just waiting for the right moment to bury them in their own mess. And believe me, my patience was just getting started. Betrayal is a cancer. It doesn't announce its arrival with a sudden, sharp pain. It metastasizes in the dark, a silent proliferation of abnormal cells, a lingering glance, a secret text message, a shared laugh that excludes you, until one day you wake up and realize the healthy tissue of your trust has been eaten away, leaving behind a hollow, rotting cavity. Lily's demand for a divorce was the primary tumor, but the disease had been spreading long before. And Ethan, my so-called best friend, was the carcinogen. Looking back, the signs were all there, a constellation of red flags I had willfully ignored. Hindsight is a cruel editor, highlighting every missed cue and foolish assumption. It started subtly, with the casual, almost unconscious way Lily began to pepper our conversations with Ethan's name. Ethan thinks this new political candidate is a joke, she'd mention over dinner. I nod, thinking nothing of it. Ethan was our friend, a constant presence in our lives. Of course she'd mention him, but the mentions grew more frequent and more intimate. There was a warmth, an enthusiasm in her voice when she spoke of him that had long since vanished from her conversations with me. The first truly jarring moment, the one that pierced through my denial, occurred on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Lily returned from what she had described as a quick lunch with Ethan, her face flushed with a vibrant, youthful glow I hadn't seen in years. She was practically vibrating with a giddy energy. When I asked what was so amusing, she waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's just something Ethan said. It's an inside joke. You wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it." The words hung in the air between us, a stark, invisible wall. Since when was I on the outside of my own marriage, peering in through a window at a life being lived without me? The truth, I reluctantly admitted to myself, was that I had been on the outside for a long, long time. After that, I started to see everything. The way her fingers would dance across her phone screen, a secretive smile playing on her lips before she'd quickly lock it and slide it away if I entered the room. The way she suddenly took a renewed interest in her appearance, spending hours getting ready for a simple, platonic outing with Ethan. And the gaslighting. The constant, wearying gaslighting. When I'd gently probe, my questions cloaked in feigned nonchalance, she'd roll her eyes. "Oh, Derek, don't be so insecure. We're just friends. You're overthinking things." Overthinking. The classic refrain of the guilty, a verbal sleight of hand designed to shift the burden of suspicion onto the accuser. Still, I held my tongue. What would a confrontation accomplish? She would deny everything, her voice dripping with manufactured indignation. She would twist my concern into paranoia, painting me as the jealous, controlling husband who couldn't handle her having male friends. It was a battle I couldn't win, not yet. So I played the fool. I let her believe I was blind to her deception, too preoccupied with my own supposed failures to notice the slow, deliberate unraveling of our life together. The final, undeniable confirmation of their treachery arrived unannounced, in the form of Ethan himself. I was in the living room, surrounded by the cardboard box ruins of my life, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ethan standing on my porch, his face arranged in a mask of concerned sincerity, a confident, predatory grin lurking just beneath the surface. He breezed past me into the house without an invitation. "Derek, my man," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder as if we were just two pals catching up over a beer. "How's it going? Heard you were moving on to bigger and better things." I stared at him, the full force of his betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. Every ounce of my self-control was being marshaled to prevent me from rearranging his handsome, duplicitous face. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, my voice dangerously level. He leaned against the wall, striking a pose of casual nonchalance that was clearly rehearsed. "Just checking in, buddy. Lily told me you were moving out, and I figured you might need a hand with the heavy lifting." The offer of help from the very man who was moving into my life, my home, my bed, was an act of psychological sadism, so profound it was almost impressive. "I've got it handled," I said curtly, turning my back on him and resuming my task of taping up a box of books. But Ethan wasn't finished. He lingered, and I could feel the gears turning in his head. He hadn't come to help. He had come to gloat, to stake his claim, to piss on the territory he had just conquered. "Listen," he began, his voice dropping into a tone of mock sympathy that made my skin crawl. "I know this has got to be tough for you, man. But, things happen. Things happen." I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I slowly turned to face him, taking a deliberate step forward, closing the distance between us until he was forced to meet my gaze. "Yeah, Ethan, things do happen. And sometimes those things have a funny way of coming back to bite you in the ass." For the first time, I saw him falter. The smug confidence in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, of fear. He hadn't expected me to stand up for myself. He, like Lily, had expected me to be a puddle on the floor. I didn't give him time to recover. I turned back to my packing, a clear and final dismissal. He shuffled his feet nervously by the door. "You've always been a cool guy, Derek," he stammered, a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "No hard feelings, yeah?" I didn't answer. Silence can be a weapon, far more potent than any shouted insult, especially when the person you're wielding it against is desperate for absolution. He left without another word. As I watched his car pull away from the curb, I let out a long, shuddering breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Later that night, lying alone in a bed that felt vast and cold, I replayed the last few months in my mind. The missed signals, the casual lies, the calculated betrayal. I could have exploded. I could have confronted them both, screamed until my throat was raw, and demanded answers I already knew. But what would have been the point? They had already written me out of their story, demoted me to a minor character, a footnote in their grand romance. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that I was not the passive, naive victim they had created in their minds. I had been watching. I had been listening. I had been planning. If Lily and Ethan thought they could simply waltz off into the sunset together, hand in hand, without any consequences, they were about to receive a rude and brutal awakening. Because betrayal isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of the game. And as far as I was concerned, this was a game I had every intention of winning. Divorce. It's such a sterile, clinical word for an act of such profound and messy violence. It suggests a clean break, a neat and tidy conclusion. But as Lily and I stepped into the sterile, beige conference room for the mediation, I knew this was anything but an ending. For her, it was a victory lap. She arrived dressed for the occasion in a sharp, tailored power suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. She was radiating an aura of success, of a woman who had successfully upgraded her life. And Ethan was there, of course, lurking in the hallway like a loyal, slobbering dog, his presence a silent, smug testament to their shared conquest. He didn't dare enter the room, but his proximity screamed a message loud and clear. Lily wasn't just divorcing me. She was parading her betrayal, reveling in it. "Derek, let's try to get through this without any unnecessary drama," she said as we took our seats across the long, polished table from each other. "I don't want this to be any harder than it needs to be." The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. She spoke of making things easy after having taken a sledgehammer to the foundations of our 12-year marriage. "I have no intention of dragging this out," I replied, my voice a calm, steady island in the turbulent sea of my emotions. I met her gaze and held it, refusing to flinch. Her lawyer, a slick, reptilian man with too much gel in his hair, laid out her terms. She wanted the house, the majority of the furniture, and what she assumed was a significant portion of my meager savings. She was expecting a fight. I could see it in the way she braced herself, the subtle tensing of her shoulders. She anticipated that I would bargain, that I would plead, that I would at least put up some token resistance. I did none of those things. I listened patiently, nodded at the appropriate times, and when the lawyer finished, I simply said, "I agree to all terms." I signed every document placed in front of me without a single question or hesitation. A look of genuine confusion flickered across Lily's face. You're okay with all of this?" she stammered, her carefully constructed composure momentarily cracking. "Why wouldn't I be?" I asked, my tone light, almost breezy. "It's just stuff, Lily. You can have it." I saw the doubt warring with her relief, but she quickly papered over it with that familiar, smug smile. She thought she had one. She believed she was walking away with the spoils of war, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back. What she couldn't possibly know was that the house she had fought so hard for wasn't mine to give. It was a long-term rental, a lease held in my name that I had used as a home office when I first launched my consulting business. And the savings she was so gleefully taking, a mere fraction of my actual net worth. The real money, the serious money, was tucked away in a complex portfolio of investments and offshore accounts that she had no knowledge of and no legal claim to. As the last document was signed and the mediator declared the process complete, Lily leaned back in her chair, a look of profound, patronizing satisfaction on her face. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with false magnanimity, "I'm so glad we could handle this like mature adults." I simply nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. A week later, I finished packing the last of my personal belongings and walked out of that house for the last time. I left everything she had demanded. The furniture, the artwork, the expensive kitchen appliances she had insisted on buying but had never once used. It was a small price to pay for my freedom. Let her have her trinkets. Let her build her new life on the hollow foundation of material possessions. Ethan, predictably, moved in before my side of the bed was even cold. A well-meaning neighbor sent me a photo, a candid shot of him hauling boxes up the driveway, while Lily stood on the porch, beaming like a queen surveying her new kingdom. They were playing house, two teenagers drunk on the thrill of their illicit affair, completely oblivious to the financial and emotional tsunami that was gathering just over the horizon. What Lily didn't know, what she could never have imagined, was that I'd been quietly, methodically documenting her affair with Ethan for months. I had photos, saved text messages, even a GPS history from a tracker I'd placed on her car that detailed their clandestine lunches at a seedy motel on the other side of town. I had enough evidence to drag her through the mud in court, to contest every one of her demands, and expose her for the liar and cheat she was. But I chose not to. Why? Because a messy, protracted legal battle would only prolong my connection to her. I wanted a clean break. More than that, I wanted something far more satisfying than a courtroom victory. I wanted to watch karma, in its own time and in its own way, dismantle their lives piece by piece. And I wanted a front row seat for the entire demolition. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into building my new life. My business, freed from the negative energy of my dying marriage, began to flourish. New, lucrative contracts landed on my desk, and my income soared. Meanwhile, Lily and Ethan were putting on a grand performance for the world, a carefully curated social media campaign designed to showcase their perfect, blissful love. I didn't react. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't even look at their profiles. My silence was a void, a black hole that I knew would eventually start to pull them in. It was only a matter of time. One afternoon, a text popped up on my phone from a mutual friend. "Derek, did you hear Lily's throwing a massive housewarming party? She and Ethan are really going all in on this." I smiled to myself. Of course they were. Lily had always been an addict, and her drug of choice was external validation. She needed an audience to applaud her life choices. She had no idea that the stage she was performing on was a flimsy, temporary structure built on a foundation of lies, and that foundation was already beginning to crumble. As I sat in my new, minimalist apartment that evening, gazing out at the glittering expanse of the city skyline, a profound sense of peace washed over me. Lily thought she had taken everything from me. She had no idea that she had actually given me the greatest gift of all, my freedom. And as for Ethan, he was about to learn a very hard lesson. When you steal something that doesn't belong to you, you often end up paying a much higher price than you ever imagined. Revenge, I mused, is a dish best served cold. And I was just beginning to set the table. I'm not entirely sure what idyllic fantasy Lily had constructed in her mind when she and Ethan decided to make their tawdry affair official. Perhaps she envisioned a life straight out of a romance novel. Endless weekend brunches, spontaneous romantic getaways, and the intoxicating thrill of a passion that had conquered all obstacles. If so, she was in for a rude and rapid awakening to the harsh realities of her choices. It didn't take long for the cracks in their perfect facade to appear, and I, from my distant, silent vantage point, had the pleasure of watching it all unfold. There was no need for me to intervene. They were perfectly capable of digging their own graves. The first whispers of trouble reached me through the grapevine of our mutual acquaintances. A friend called me, her voice a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "Derek, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but things with Lily and Ethan seem a little strained." According to her, they were struggling to maintain the lavish lifestyle they had so proudly put on display. "She's throwing all these elaborate dinner parties, trying to show everyone how happy they are," my friend confided. "But I heard from a reliable source that Ethan's been living way beyond his means, and they're already falling behind on bills." I wasn't surprised. Ethan had always been a man who was in love with the appearance of success, not the hard work required to achieve it. He had a taste for expensive clothes, flashy cars, and fine dining, but he lacked the discipline and, more importantly, the income to sustain it. Lily, in her blind infatuation, had clearly failed to do her due diligence. She had traded a man who was quietly building an empire for a charismatic showman with a foundation of debt and an ego built on sand. Then came the stories of their arguments. The picture-perfect couple, it turned out, was anything but. Friends spoke of tense, uncomfortable gatherings where the air was thick with unspoken resentment. Neighbors reported hearing shouting matches that echoed through the thin walls of their rental house. Yes, rental. The house that Lily had been so proud to win in the divorce was gone. As I had known she would, she quickly discovered that she couldn't afford the mortgage and upkeep on her own. She had been forced to sell at a loss and move into a smaller, less impressive rental property. One afternoon, I received a call from an old neighbor from my former street, a sweet, elderly woman who had always been fond of me. "Derek, you are not going to believe this," she said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed laughter. "Lily and Ethan had the landlord banging on their door this morning, in front of all the neighbors. Apparently, they're behind on the rent." I leaned back in my executive office chair, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across my face. "Oh, really? How far behind?" "3 months," she chirped. "They're trying to play it cool, but you can tell they're completely mortified." It was a beautiful, poetic justice. The life they had built on the ashes of our marriage was now collapsing under the weight of their own arrogance and financial irresponsibility. Meanwhile, my own life was moving in the opposite direction. My income, which had already been substantial, had skyrocketed in the months since the divorce. Freed from the constant stress and negativity of my marriage, I was more focused and productive than ever. New opportunities and lucrative projects seemed to fall into my lap. I was building something real, something sustainable, while they were struggling to keep the lights on in their hollow, rented love nest. Then, one evening, a text message from an unknown number appeared on my phone. It was Lily. Her tone was artificially breezy, a pathetic attempt to feign casualness. Hey, Derek. Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to check in and see how you are." I stared at the message for a long moment, a cynical smile playing on my lips. I could read the desperation between the lines. This wasn't a friendly check-in. This was a reconnaissance mission. She was fishing for information, testing the waters. I decided to play along. "Things are going great, Lily," I typed back. "Business is booming. How about you?" Her reply was almost instantaneous. "Oh, Ethan and I are doing fine. Just managing." Managing. That was a generous way to put it. The real bombshell dropped a week later. I was leaving a highly successful meeting with a new international client, feeling on top of the world when I saw her. Lily was waiting for me on the sidewalk outside my gleaming office building. She looked diminished. The polished, confident woman who had left me was gone, replaced by a tired, anxious-looking stranger. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes were cheap, and there were dark, worried circles under her eyes. "Derek," she said, her voice thin and reedy, filled with an emotion I hadn't heard from her in a very long time: uncertainty. I walked towards her, my face a carefully neutral mask. "Lily, what a surprise. What brings you to this part of town?" She wrung her hands, fiddling nervously with the strap of her worn-out purse. I was in the area and I thought, I want to talk. Things have been tough lately, and I just thought maybe we could catch up." Catch up. I knew exactly what she wanted, but I was not going to make it easy for her. I glanced at my watch. "I'm sorry. I'm a little busy right now," I said, my tone polite but firm. "But I do hope things get better for you." I offered her a tight, insincere smile and walked away, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk. As I strode down the street, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel her watching me go, her hope crumbling into dust. This was karma in its purest, most elegant form. Lily and Ethan had thought they were trading up, that they were leaving me behind for a bigger, better life. They had failed to understand that the value of a person isn't measured in flashy gestures and empty promises, but in character, integrity, and resilience. Now, they were trapped in a prison of their own, making a life they couldn't afford and a relationship that was rotting from the inside out. And the best part of it all? I didn't have to lift a single finger. They had done all the work for me. All I had to do was sit back, watch, and enjoy the show. Their perfect little world was imploding, and my revenge hadn't even truly begun.